figuring out the future for our local schools. It feels like, well, trying to solve a really complex puzzle, with pieces that keep shifting.
Definitely. You've got changing student numbers, how education itself evolves.
And always the money.
Right.
That financial reality.
Absolutely. So planning for the long haul isn't just like a smart idea, it's crucial. Essential, really, to make sure our schools keep serving our kids and communities well.
Exactly. And that brings us right to the heart of our conversation today. The future of USD 434 Santa Fe Trail.
We've been really digging into recent Board of Education discussions and a preliminary financial analysis, trying to get a handle on where the district might be heading.
Yeah, and our goal here for you today is to take all these, frankly, complicated documents and just pull out the key stuff. We want to shed some light on the potential roads ahead.
We're talking district reconfiguration, maybe how the school buildings are set up.
What upgrades they might need, and this is the big one, what it all means financially.
Right. We looked at Board of Ed meeting minutes. Lots of good questions and answers in there, actually.
And that special meeting transcript from YouTube.
Yep, that too. Plus the initial financial analysis they got.
And really, it seems like two main possibilities are emerging from all this.
That's right. A one-campus model or a two-campus model. We're going to dig into both, what they actually involve, the costs, all the things the board's weighing up right now.
Okay, let's dive right in then. What's the fundamental difference between these two ways of setting things up?
Essentially, it's about how you group the grade levels. The one-campus idea, that's everybody, pre-K all the way up to 12th grade, on one site, the current high school site.
Everyone together, okay.
Then the two-campus approach splits them up. Usually you'd see maybe pre-K through 5th or 6th grade at one place.
The younger kids.
Right. And then the middle and high school students, maybe 6th through 12th, somewhere else.
Got it. So let's try and paint a picture of that one campus future. What would that actually look like on the ground? The buildings, the changes.
Okay, so the architects HTK, they presented a revised concept. A big piece of this is a totally new elementary building for pre-K through 6th grade.
A brand new school.
Yeah, pretty substantial. 59,000 square feet, estimated cost around $26.9 million.
Wow.
And they put it where the annex was shown in earlier plans. It would have its own playground, ball fields, all that stuff for the little kids.
A whole new elementary?
Yeah.
That's major.
Yeah.
What about the older kids then? The middle and high schoolers who'd also be there.
Right, so the high school site itself would get a lot of work. For the 6th to 8th graders, there's a proposed addition of new offices, classrooms, about 6,200 square feet, costing maybe $2.6 million.
Okay.
And they'd also renovate existing classrooms, fix up the kitchen serving line. That's another, 18,000 square feet or so, for about $3.3 million. And interestingly, they're talking about turning the basement shop area into high school classrooms.
Really? The basement?
Yeah, for about $500,000. Trying to be resourceful with the space they have, I guess.
That's definitely thinking outside the box. What else is planned for the high school site in this one campus idea?
A pretty big addition for a gym and locker rooms, over 9,500 square feet, costing around $4.1 million.
Another gym.
Yeah. And then there's $3.9 million specifically earmarked for just required upgrades to the existing high school building itself. Things that need doing anyway.
Right. General upkeep and necessary fixes.
Exactly. Plus expanding the band room for $1.5 million and new parking, middle and high school specific, for $1.2 million, trying to head off traffic jams.
Okay, that's a huge amount happening in just one location. What about athletics? Those fields are always a big deal in the community.
Good point. The current baseball and softball fields, they'd have to move. That's estimated at $2.75 million.
Move the fields. Okay.
And they'd need a new kitchen access drive just for better traffic flow, about $162,000. Plus upgrades to the elementary drive and parking, a new bus loop, another $1.4 million there.
So if you add up all that core stuff, what's the total price tag looking like for this one campus vision?
Well, the initial estimate they're giving is somewhere between $48.3 million and $51.5 million. Maybe a bit higher.
$50 million plus.
And that's just the main plan. There are also, optional extras for athletics that could push the cost up even more.
Optional extras, like what kind of things?
Things like a turf football field for $1.2 million, a separate building for wrestling and multi-purpose use, maybe $1.7 million, maybe a 4th gym, like a competition gym, for $1.8 million plus, moving the track and field setup for $160K, a concessions building for $780K, and even more parking for almost $1 million.
Wow. So if they did all of that.
Yeah, if you add all those potential extras in, you're looking at over $58 million. easily.
Okay, that's a significant range.
Mm.
Thinking practically now, if you've got middle schoolers and high schoolers sharing a campus,
Yeah.
how does that work with things like the library, the cafeteria?
So the plan suggests several key spaces would be shared. The library, yes. The commons area or cafeteria, the main kitchen, specialized rooms like band and choir too, weight room, tech resources, even the main office would likely serve both. But importantly, the plan does include new construction just for middle school needs, core classrooms, art room, their own gym, and locker rooms.
Ah, okay. So some shared, some separate.
Exactly. Trying to balance efficiency with having dedicated spaces for each level.
Shared spaces make sense financially, I guess. But parking? I mean, with all those students and staff in one place, wouldn't that be a nightmare?
It's definitely something they've considered, yeah. It came up, civil engineers weighed in, and the plans include different options for traffic flow, trying to make it work. Those new parking areas we mentioned are a big part of that solution.
Right, right. One last thing on the one campus idea. The basic infrastructure, like can the water system even handle all this expansion?
Good question. The civil engineer checked with the rural water district,
Okay.
and the feedback was that the current system does have enough capacity for the planned additions, even potential future athletic stuff.
That's good news.
It is. But depending on the final size of everything, they might still need to install extra fire suppression tanks, just to be sure they have enough water coverage for emergencies.
Got it. Okay, that gives a really solid picture of the one campus possibility. Now, let's shift gears. The two campus approach. How could that look? What are the variations?
So the core idea here is splitting the grades, typically pre-K through 5 at one site, 6 through 12 at another.
Right.
The main discussion seems to be around using the Carbondale Attendance Center, SAC, and the current high school as those two sites.
Second, the high school.
But they also talked about possibly using the Overbrook building instead of KK for one of the campuses.
Okay, so a couple of different location combos. What are the specific scenarios they've mapped out?
Well, one scenario is repurpose the Scranton building for pre-K 5, repurpose Overbrook for the middle school, grades 6-8, renovate Carbondale, and then add on to the high school for grades 9-12.
Okay. That uses multiple existing buildings.
Another option, repurpose Carbondale for pre-K 5, repurpose Overbrook for 6-8, but Overbrook would need an addition to fit those grades, and then renovate the high school just for the high schoolers.
Interesting. So in that scenario where Carbondale CAG becomes the pre-K 5 school, would they need to build anything new there?
Based on what we saw, it looks like no new additions would be needed at CAC itself to make it a pre-K 5 building.
Oh, okay. That could definitely save some money on that site.
For sure.
But what about the high school in a two-campus setup?
Yeah.
In that first scenario you mentioned, it would still need to house the middle school, right? 6 through 8?
Yes, exactly. If the middle school moves to the high school site in a two-campus model, they'd need an addition there for offices, classrooms, a kitchen, an auxiliary gym, locker rooms, specifically for those 6th to 8th graders.
Makes sense.
Plus, they'd do renovations at the high school to create more classroom space usable by both high school and the relocated middle school students. The estimate for just that 6 to 8 addition and related high school renovations is around $17.5 million.
$17.5 million just for that part. Okay. And what about the work needed at Carbondale and Overbrook in these scenarios? You mentioned repurposing and renovating.
Right. If Carbondale were to become the pre-K 5 building, there's about $2.3 million in upgrades needed. Things like mechanical, electrical systems, new finishes, improving hallways, elevator work for accessibility.
Standard renovation stuff.
Pretty much. And if the middle school moves out of Carbondale, those old locker rooms, about 2,800 square feet, could potentially be turned into more classroom space.
Ah, repurposing again.
Yeah. Plus, they'd need to pave that parking lot across the street for safety and just usability.
Okay. That seems fairly straightforward for Carbondale. What about Overbrook? If they use that building instead, maybe for the older elementary or middle grades?
Okay, if Overbrook were used, say, to house 4th and 5th grade along with 6th through 8th grade, it would need a pretty big classroom addition, about 11,225 square feet, costing roughly $4.8 million.
Almost $5 million just for an addition at Overbrook.
Yeah, to fit those extra grades. On top of that, the existing Overbrook building needs about $1.4 million in required upgrades, parking, restrooms, kitchen, general finishes, getting it up to snuff. This scenario would also mean reorganizing the current grades there and maybe using some SPED or flex rooms as regular classrooms, depending on numbers.
So adding it all up, What are the rough total costs for these two campus options, the one using Kecky and the one using Overbrook?
Okay, so the estimate for the two-campus option that uses CAC, with Scranton for pre-K-5, HS for 612, is around $19.8 million, plus that $17.5 million for the high school work we talked about.
So closer to $37 million total.
Roughly, yeah. And the option using Overbrook with Carbondale for pre-K-5 is estimated at $23.7 million for the work at those two sites, again, plus the $17.5 million needed at the high school.
Making that one over $41 million.
In that ballpark, yes.
Okay. So it seems like whether it's one campus or two, the high school building itself has some pretty major needs. What are the big priorities identified there?
That's absolutely right. No matter how they arrange the grades, the existing high school needs work. They actually have a prioritized top 10 list.
Oh, yeah? What's on it?
Things like renovating the annex for a proper ag classroom and shop, making the main entry more secure, standardizing those odd-shaped classrooms we'll talk about, reconfiguring the kitchen, adding athletic storage, fixing some structural settlement near the main office, repairing the dome roof that's been an issue.
I've heard about the dome roof.
Yeah. Dealing with moisture in the basement, replacing old HVAC, improving science lab exhaust. There's already $3.9 million specifically set aside just for those kinds of crucial fixes at the high school.
That's a hefty list of essential work.
Yeah.
And we mentioned the band room expansion earlier. Is that part of these high school priorities too?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
That $1.5 million band room expansion is part of the overall improvement plan for the high school site.
So when you add up all the high school stuff, including that potential $17.5 million for a 6 to 8 addition renovation in the two-campus plan.
It's clear, yeah. A significant investment in the high school site is on the table regardless of which overall model they choose.
You mentioned standardizing classrooms. One specific thing was those triangular classrooms at the high school. That sounds awkward for teaching.
It does, doesn't it? They've looked at how to fix that, how to make them functional rectangular spaces.
What are the options?
Well, they could maybe fit 4 smaller rectangular rooms where 4 triangular ones are now, but they might be kind of narrow.
Maybe not ideal.
Or create 3 larger rectangular rooms from the same space, but those might end up bigger than needed for some classes.
Right.
The idea that seems to have the most traction is breaking them into 3 better-sized rectangular rooms and maybe incorporating the outside wall into a new hallway as part of an addition, sort of right-sizing them and improving the building's flow at the same time.
Okay, makes sense. One last facilities question. The district office. Where does that end up in these plans? It's got to go somewhere.
Good point. Several options there, too. Maybe part of the annex building, sharing with CTE programs, perhaps.
Okay.
Or they could build space for it into any new additions that happen.
Integrate it.
Right. Or sometimes districts put the office in a larger space within an existing school, like maybe part of a library or a cafeteria that's not fully utilized. All those are possibilities they're considering.
Okay, that really rounds out the picture on the buildings. One campus, two campuses, the high school needs. Now let's get to the part I know everyone's thinking about. The money, the financial implications.
Right. So to tackle the financial and tax side, the board brought in Clayton Kelly from Piper Sandler.
Piper Sandler. They work with schools a lot, don't they?
They really do. They have tons of experience with Kansas school bonds, been involved in like the vast majority of school bond elections statewide over the past decade. So they know their stuff.
Okay. And it's probably important up front to clarify how schools even pay for these huge projects, right? What's the difference between using capital outlay funds versus issuing a bond?
Crucial difference. Capital outlay funds come from a specific property tax levy capped at 8 mills in Kansas. Districts can use that money for certain improvements, equipment, that sort of thing.
Like ongoing funds?
Sort of, yeah.
Yep.
But for really big projects like these, they often need a bond issue. That's where the district borrows a large amount up front.
And pays it back over time.
Exactly. Usually over many years through a separate bond and interest property tax levy. And importantly, voters have to approve that levy in an election.
Right.
And just to stress, at the meeting where Piper Sandler presented, the board wasn't making any decisions. It was purely about getting information, understanding the landscape.
Got it. Information gathering. So what about the district's overall financial health? Assessed valuation growth, how does that play into all this?
Historically, USD 434 has seen pretty decent growth in its assessed valuation, or AV. That's the total value of taxable property in the district.
Okay.
Over the last 10 years, it averaged about 4.5% growth annually the last 3 years. Even better, around 6.5% average.
So the tax base is growing.
Yeah, the pie is getting bigger. But for these projections, they're using a much more conservative growth estimate, just 1% per year.
Why so low?
It's standard practice, really. Prudent. You don't want to overestimate future income and get caught short if growth slows down. Better to be cautious.
Okay. And the mill levy. We hear about the 20 mills for the general fund,
Yeah.
the LOB. How does all that fit with capital outlay and a potential bond levy to make up the total tax rate?
Right. The total mill levy, the tax rate, has several parts. The general fund is usually 20 mills statewide for basic operations. The local option budget, or LOB, is extra money districts can levy locally. Capital outlay is that dedicated levy up to 8 mills, which USD 434 uses. And then the bond and interest levy is specifically for paying back bond debt. That's the one that goes up or down depending on bond payments.
And for USD 434.
Looking back, their bond and interest levy has bounced around a bit, maybe between 2.7 and just over 5 mils in the last decade, as they've paid off previous bonds.
Now, one thing I know has changed a lot is state aid for school bonds. How does that work now compared to before? This seems really critical.
It is absolutely critical. It massively impacts the local cost. See, for bonds voters approved before mid-2015, the state kicked in a pretty big chunk of aid for the payments.
How much?
For USD 434's existing bonds, state aid was as high as 61%.
Wow, over half.
Yeah. But for any new bonds authorized after 2022, that state aid plummets. It's down to just 11%.
11% from 61.
Huge drop. It's because of changes in state law back in 2015, 2016. It fundamentally shifted the burden. Now, local taxpayers have to cover a much, much bigger share of new construction costs.
Why the change?
The current formula is based on a district's wealth per student compared to the poorest district in the state. As a district like Santa Fe Trail gets relatively wealthier per pupil, its state aid percentage for bonds goes down.
Okay, that's a tough reality. So keeping that big drop in state aid in mind, let's look at specifics. What happens if the district does nothing? No new bond right now, status quo. What's the mill levy impact?
The analysis looked at that. Basically, their current bond, the Series 2013 bond, gets paid off in 2028.
Okay.
So assuming other levies stay stable, the bond and interest part of the mill levy would just gradually decrease and eventually go away as that debt is retired.
So taxes might go down slightly long term if they do nothing new?
Potentially, yes. No big increases from new debt anyway, just normal fluctuations.
Okay, that's the baseline. Now, what if they do go for a bond? Let's take that bigger number first, say $53.2 million. That aligns with the higher end of the one campus costs. What does that do to property taxes?
Okay, for a $53.2 million bond, assuming 30 years and maybe a 5% interest rate, the annual payments for the district would be around $2.7 million.
Right.
To raise that money, the bond and interest mill levy would need to jump way up to about 33.8 mils.
33 mils just for the bond.
Yeah, that's an increase of about 29.5 mils over what it is now, a very significant jump.
Can you translate that? Like for homeowners, what does a 29.5 mil increase actually cost someone? Say for different home values, $75K, $100K, $150K, $200K, $250K.
Sure. Let's see. For a $75,000 home, that increase works out to about $254 extra per year in property taxes. For a $100,000 home, it's around $339 a year. A $150,000 home, about $548 more annually.
Wow.
$200,000 home would see roughly $678 extra, and a $250,000 home, about $847 more per year.
Those are noticeable increases.
Definitely. And it's worth noting, a bond this size could push the district's total mill levy up to around 79 mils.
How does that compare?
Well, based on current data, 79 mils would actually be higher than the highest total mill levy for any school district in Kansas right now.
Higher than anyone else in the state.
Okay.
So that puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
What about the smaller bond scenario? Say around $30.3 million, closer to some of the two campus estimates. What's the impact there?
Okay, $30.3 million bond, same assumptions, 30 years, 5% interest. The required bond and interest levy would be lower, naturally, estimated around 19.1 mils.
Still an increase, though.
Oh, yeah, still an increase of about 14.8 mils compared to now, just not as steep as the other scenario.
And how does that 14.8 mil increase hit homeowners? Some examples.
Okay. For the $75,000 home, that's about $127 extra per year. A $100,000 home, around $170 more annually. A $150,000 home, roughly $255 extra.
Okay.
$200,000 home sees about $340 more per year. And the $250,000 home, about $425 extra annually.
So still significant, but roughly half the impact of the larger bond scenario.
Pretty much, yeah. And this level of bond would likely put the total district mill levy around 64 mills.
And how does 64 mills compare statewide?
That's more in line with other districts that have passed bonds recently. Districts like Eudora, Iola, they're in that general vicinity.
Okay. Of course, it's not just homeowners paying property taxes. What about businesses? Farms?
Right. The analysis touched on that. Commercial property gets assessed at a higher rate, so their dollar increase would generally be about double what a homeowner pays for the same property value.
Double.
And
Right.
for ag land, it's calculated differently based on use value, not market value. They gave examples of potential increases per acre for cropland and grassland under each bond scenario.
Got it. The timing of putting this to a vote, that's also key. When can these elections happen? And what's the thinking behind choosing, say, a general election versus a special one?
So state law limits the timing now. Basically, you're looking at the August primary election, the November general election, or special election usually held in March.
Okay, specific windows.
Yeah. And the district has to finalize the plan, the projects, the total cost about 3 months before the election date for legal notices, getting ballots ready, all that.
And general versus special election, pros and cons.
General elections like November usually have much higher voter turnout because other races are on the ballot. Plus, there's no direct cost to the school district to be on that ballot.
Higher turnout, no cost. Sounds good.
It can be. But a special election, like in March, often has lower turnout. It's just the bond question.
Which could be good or bad.
Right. Maybe it's easier to communicate the specific issue to a more focused group of voters. But the downside is the district has to pay the costs of running that special election, which can be significant. Sometimes they even roll that cost into the bond itself if it passes.
Lots to consider there. This is obviously a massive amount for the board and the community to chew on. What are the immediate next steps? I know there's talk of a steering committee.
That's the crucial next step, yeah. Forming a community steering committee. The whole idea is to get broad public input, feedback on the options.
Get the community involved.
Exactly. They put out an interest form, and apparently over 30 people signed up already, which is great.
That's good engagement.
Yeah, and the goal is to get diverse representation. People from Scranton, Carbondale, Overbrook, the rural areas, parents, non-parents, community members, a real mix of perspectives.
Makes sense. How will this committee actually work? What's their role in guiding the board?
The initial thought is maybe 3 to 5 meetings for the committee, each meeting with specific goals, to help guide the board's thinking.
Okay.
The first meeting was tentatively set for May 22nd, 6 p.m. at the high school. They expect 3 board members to be there, plus lead principals.
And what will the committee actually do?
Their main job is to look hard at both the one-campus and two-campus models, weigh the pros and cons educationally, operationally, financially, give feedback.
So really dig into the details we've been talking about.
Precisely. And interestingly, they mentioned the committee's feedback might even bring a 3-campus option back into discussion if there's strong community feeling for it.
Oh, really? A 3-campus option?
It's a possibility, yeah. Though they'd need to get some rough cost estimates for that pretty quickly if the committee leaned that way.
Right.
Ultimately, the Board of Education takes all that input from the committee,
Right.
listens to it, and uses that valuable feedback to make the final informed decision on the best path forward for USD 434.
And the timing for a potential bond vote, August, November, March, really depends on how quickly this committee works and what they recommend.
That seems to be the case, yes. Their progress will heavily influence that timeline.
Wow. It is just so clear that these are incredibly complex decisions facing USD 434, decisions that will shape the community for really decades to come.
No doubt about it.
This deep dive, hopefully, has given you, the listener, a good snapshot of the information on the table right now, the discussions happening.
Absolutely. We've touched on the different building models, the significant costs involved for taxpayers, and the big picture vision for Santa Fe Trail schools. But it's just a picture of where things are now.
Yeah, this process is ongoing. If you want to stay plugged in, really keep an eye on local news, check the school district's official communications, look for updates on the steering committee's work and future board meetings.
Definitely stay informed. And maybe, as you've listened today, just take a moment to think about it yourself. What do you think the ideal future for education looks like right here in the Santa Fe Trail community? That's really the fundamental question at the core of all these important conversations ahead.